Remarkably, Mr. President, for the second time in just the last 3 weeks, Speaker Pelosi apparently feels compelled to have her members vote on a resolution that would reportedly condemn anti-Semitism. A resolution that will purportedly condemn anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, again, for the second time in just the last 3 weeks, this seems to be in response to the invocation of crude, hateful, and backward anti-Semitic stereotypes by one specific freshman member of the House Democratic majority. This Democratic Congresswoman already stoked controversy in mid-February, having publicly proclaimed that Israel supporters are only in it for the money. Apparently, she believes the only reason leaders would stand with the Jewish people and the state of Israel is Jewish money. Well, I think we've all heard that kind of talk before, and we must not tolerate it. During my time in the Senate, I've had the honor of traveling all over America. I know I speak for colleagues on both sides of the aisle when I say that support for the state of Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship is deeply felt all across America. Our relationship is built on common values and democratic principles, our shared interests, close partnerships, and deep friendships. The support for Israel that you see in this chamber, is not the work of some shadow conspiracy. The members of this body support Israel because so many Americans support Israel. I'd hoped this regrettable episode might have caused this lawmaker to be more careful with her language. But alas, just a few weeks later, here we are again. More anti-Semitic tropes. This time she claims that supporters of Israel have actually, quote, an allegiance to a foreign country. That's the old, ugly, dual loyalty smear, Mr. President, plain as day. We should also not overlook that in a few cases, these anti-Semitic statements have provoked offensive anti-Muslim comments in response. That is hateful and completely inexcusable as well. So now the House of Representatives seeks to distance itself from this member's remarks and will apparently soon vote to condemn anti-Semitism for the second time in just a few weeks. Well, I hope this time the message is clear. Support for Israel isn't about the Benjamins. It's about the hearts and minds of the American people. And it's unconscionable for any member of the United States Congress, even less a member of the House Foreign Relations Committee, to repeatedly traffic in base stereotypes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. Thank the gentleman from New York for his comments. We're here today because a member of this body issued a series of anti-Semitic statements. And I couldn't help but think of what justice means and what mercy means. Well, we want to temper justice with mercy. So the first time we come to understand that maybe the depth of what was said was maybe accidental. The second time, maybe less so. And certainly the third time, we now have a pattern. And we begin to wonder how we extend mercy when justice cries out against one who is anti-Semitic. It doesn't help that Democratic leaders have attempted to rationalize and protect this individual, whether it's appearing on the cover of a national magazine, whether it's saying, quote, she did not understand the full weight of the words, close quote. One wonders what more needs to be done to try to eradicate anti-Semitism from this body. Some have said that to specifically condemn these statements and to remove her from her committee assignments would stifle legitimate criticism of Israel. But the problem with that argument is this. The comments made were not directed at Israel, were not directed to to policy were not directed towards the American-Israel relationship. They were instead directed to Americans with the allegation that they have a dual loyalty, which is an ancient anti-Semitic cliche that has been used to target the Jewish community throughout history. How about this in the future? If a member of Congress desires to criticize Israel or criticize American policy towards Israel, maybe they can do so without resorting to an anti-Semitic rhetoric that is inflammatory, unnecessary, and frankly, it's hateful. So we stand here today and we look at a resolution condemning hatred of any kind. Who can disagree with that? I don't. I don't disagree with that. But what I will say is, you cannot temper justice any longer with mercy, with rationalization. Sooner or later, you have to face what the awful truth is. And if someone is going to persist in making anti-Semitic, hateful statements, to bury that is inexcusable. With that, I yield.
The gentleman yields back. Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, is recognized.
Where is he? Oh. Mr. Speaker, I now yield the distinguished Majority Leader, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer, 1 minute.
The gentleman from Maryland, the Majority Leader, is recognized.
Let me suggest at the outset that no party be too self-righteous on the issue of supporting prejudice and bigotry too often. This is a very serious matter. It is important to call out anti-Semitism in a way that is unmistakable and unambiguous. We must do so, because whenever some people begin to question the allegiance or patriotism of Americans, indeed whether certain people fully belong as part of our country, it is critical to set the record straight. Recent statements employing time-worn tropes of dual loyalty have deeply and correctly unsettled American Jewish communities, because their allegation is, simply put, that American Jews who support Israel are not loyal to this country. I stand as a very strong supporter of Israel and a very loyal American. Such allegations fall into, as has been said, a century-old and dark history of Jews being marginalized and set apart. They recall past evils that occurred in other countries and in our own when, according to the Anti-Defamation League, people accused Jews of, and I quote, being disloyal neighbors or citizens because of their connection to Israel or Jewish communities elsewhere in the world. That was false, and it was bigoted. To be clear, the First Amendment protects the right of every American to criticize policies and leaders, whether in our own country or others. That is the glory of our democracy. However, in these past few weeks, those who say they are only criticizing Israel's leaders or policies have instead been making claims about the allegiance and motivation of Israel's defenders. I do not believe there is anyone in our caucus, not one, who wishes to silence debate over policy. Rather, what is being called for is an end to the invocation of age-old anti-Semitic tropes that demonize people instead of criticize policies. Accusations that Jews bear dual allegiance because of support for Israel or concerns for its safety are false, and they are also hurtful. Canards that must be opposed and exposed for what they are: bigotry, They elicit legitimate fear and uncertainty in the individuals and communities they target. In much the same way, we have also seen vile examples of hatred aimed at painting Muslim Americans as somehow disloyal to our nation or not fully belonging, causing similar feelings of insecurity and distress. No Muslims can come to our country. Those feelings cannot be discounted either. One of our own colleagues was the target of an Islamophobic attack impugning a member of this House. That ought to be unacceptable to all of us. We have seen this same form of exclusion, hatred in recent years whenever acts of bigotry have been directed against African Americans. And when Latino and Latina citizens have been yelled at to go back to their countries. This is their country. This phenomenon is also a reminder of the horrific internment of Japanese Americans during the Second World War. None of us ought to be like Pontius Pilate and think that we have not fallen short of the principles enunciated in our Declaration. In our multicultural republic, sometimes it is incumbent upon the American people to speak as one nation, indivisible, and make clear affirmation that all Americans have an equal share in our republic, that no one's race or creed or origin can call into question one's love of country. I will continue to urge unity in the face of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, racism against African Americans and Latinos and Asian Americans, and other forms of prejudice and discrimination. American Jews, including those who serve our nation in Congress, need to be reassured that they are equal partners in the diverse coalition for justice, opportunity, tolerance, and equality, and that they have true allies who stand with them as firmly as they have stood with others. I will continue to make that clear. America is rightfully respected for its Declaration of Independence and its Constitution as amended and perfected, both of which proclaim the dignity and rights of individuals endowed by their Creator. But America has also seen too often the denial of that dignity and equality to millions of its citizens based upon the color of their skin, the land of their birth, or the faith of their forebears. My colleagues, if we are to be better than our past, we must reject all forms of bigotry and prejudice directed at any of our fellow human beings and fellow Americans.